Agreed candidate.
Well, thank you, Councilwoman Clark. I stand here today with all of my colleagues in government, with the community, to speak in one voice. This is not about Hakeem Jefffries. This is not about the Honorable Councilman Charles Barron. This is not about Congressman Adolphus Towns. This is about our community. We have one community of interest here in Brooklyn. African Americans, Caribbean Americans, standing together. But in the plan that was presented by this court, we've been sliced and diced, cracked, tossed aside, and torn asunder in violation of the principles of the Voting Rights Act and declared principles that have been articulated by courts of law in this land, and we're not going to let it happen.
That's right.
Now, you have traditionally African American communities in Fort Greene and Clinton Hill that are part of the same community of interest as Bedford-Stuyvesant. They share the same commercial corridor along Fulton Street and Myrtle Avenue. They share the same means of mass transportation along the A train, the C train, and the G line. They share a similar school district, 13, that includes parts of Fort Greene, Clinton Hill, and Bedford-Stuyvesant. Community boards 2 and 3 often work closely together, but these communities have been torn apart. Why? To bring in far-reaching neighborhoods in South Brooklyn and in Queens, like Howard Beach. Now, I'm no demographer, but I don't think Howard Beach got anything in common with Bedford-Stuyvesant. And the reality is that in order to be consistent with the community of interest standard, those neighborhoods in central Brooklyn, those Caribbean neighborhoods in the eastern and southern portions of Brooklyn, those traditionally African American neighborhoods of Brownsville and East New York and Bedford-Stuyvesant and Fort Greene and Clinton Hill should be kept together. And so we're urging this court to take corrective action and make sure that when you issue your report and recommendation on Monday, these problems have been resolved. As my colleague stated earlier, Kings County is the largest county in the state. We would be the 4th largest city, Brooklyn, if we stood alone as a municipality. We've got more than 2.5 million residents. We can support 3 entire congressional districts plus half of another one, and yet you only give us one. And in the one congressional district that you give us, the one currently known as the 11th, you break apart communities of interest. You got it wrong, but you have a chance now to get it right. And like Dr. Martin Luther King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. There was injustice in Washington Heights. There was injustice in Harlem. There's injustice in Flatbush and Bedford-Stuyvesant, and we're not going to rest until justice prevails.
Maximize the number of majority-minority districts. You necessarily have to have some non-minority communities attached to them so that you can, I guess, maximize the total number. Right now you have Ed Towns and Yvette Clark go up to Brownstone, Brooklyn, Brooklyn Heights, etc. So no matter what, don't you always going to have some like splitting of communities or random parts of Brooklyn attached?
I'll invite any of my colleagues to speak for these issues as well, but I don't believe anyone's calling for a district with 100% of any ethnicity. We're saying that in the Voting Rights Act that you cannot diminish or dilute racial or language minorities. And by the numbers that we've heard, particularly just given for the current 10th district that's listed by the magistrate as the 8th congressional district, there's a clear dilution of the vote of color in that district. So that's what our concern is, diminishing or diluting the power of a vote. That's what the Voting Rights Act is about, that there's pervasive discrimination with racial and language minorities.
It's also important to note that there are several different principles at issue here. There's the community of interest standard, as we've indicated, the corridor along Fulton Street that includes Fort Greene, Clinton Hill, into Bedford-Stuyvesant, but even stretches as far as Brooklyn Heights, is a community of interest in many ways. Brooklyn Heights sits in the same community board as Fort Greene and Clinton Hill. Brooklyn Heights, Fort Greene, Clinton Hill don't sit in the same community board as Howard Beach, as Garrison Beach, as Manhattan Beach. So you're right, this is a diverse borough. But there are reasons based on the community of interest standard, compactness, and communities that traditionally have been together in the same congressional district, excuse me, whether the 10th or the 11th, that these lines up. I have Barron finish my statement.
I agree with him. But see, why don't you ask that question of the majority white community? How come we can have 96% white communities? You don't ask how come they don't have more blacks? How come we can have communities that have 86% white and 2-3% black, even though the population right next door may be higher? They can draw any kind of lines they want to draw to get the results that they want. So if they want our communities to be empowered, it is nothing scientific about it. It's simple. You know where black people are, you know where Latino people are, then draw us together to give us power. Adam Clayton Powell fought hard to make Harlem a black district, because 1/4 of Harlem was in 4 different white districts. Adam redrew the lines and made sure he took 1/4 out of each one of those white communities and made a black district for Harlem so we can have representation. And now look at the district. It's gone. It's no longer majority black.